place is nowhere. And it's forever.
Ghosts of my life.
You are my best friend. What are you looking for? Hard to believe. I found you temporarily insane.
Hey everybody, this is Lost Futures, a Mark Fisher podcast. We're coming at you, and this is
Marlowe.
And I am Steven. And this week we're going to talk about Gray Area, an analysis, review of Chris Petit's content.
Yeah. This is a British Film Institute Sight and Sound website article from March of 2010.
I don't know if I'd call it a movie.
It's a documentary. I mean, okay, so content is one of those things that you've seen where someone drives around with a camera in their car, meanders as a voice over the whole thing about his thoughts on modernism and how he thinks that the way we make like coffee in the morning is like slightly faster than it used to be. And then he'll like chop in like clips from like other things and sometimes people talking and other interstitial things. And he does a lot of stuff with like QuickTime videos from 2010 and like early day YouTube from back in 2010. That's in there a lot. And it's an hour fucking long, and Mark Fisher's review is 3 fucking pages, and I could not possibly bring myself to watching this whole thing all the way through.
I tried.
For a 3-page goddamn article.
For anybody out there, I tried and I fell asleep. I got through a bunch of it. It is very soothing if you're looking for something to fall asleep to. It's actually quite pleasant to fall asleep to if you want. And I mean, he mentions it being ambient.
He does like literally say he was trying to do ambient, but in film, so it's even worse. And there's nothing that you people can do to stop me. Wahahaha. Yeah, he does literally say that he was trying to do like an ambient movie.
He himself has called content a, quote, 21st century road movie ambient.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it was like a type of documentary people did in the 90s a lot.
90s, 2000s.
Like the specific thing where you're like, you have a camera in your car, you're driving, and like being like, oh, I grew up in a town. And then that's like your fucking deep video essay. Yeah, anyway, so once more, we're in Stain of Place. So this is much like the last one, very placey.
Driving.
He's driving. Like, that's it.
He finds himself driving all the time, is one of the first lines. And he's just doing a pre-smartphone kind of videos.
Mm-hmm. Early 2010s. Well, yeah, he's got a little digital camera,
and you can see the pixelations, which
yeah, I mean, a lot of it is like it's very technology. What about that kind of? Yeah, like
it's laborious.
Yeah, it's very like. What's he say about email? He says something fucking stupid about email. Ah, yes, there he goes. Reflections on the subject of email, that anonymous yet intimate, ethereal communication. It's not ethereal at all. Emails are impossible to get rid of. If you send an email in 2004, there's a lawyer who can find it if they need to. Like,
and then he talks about 2 collaborators, one of whom we've met before, Ian Penman.
Yeah, right.
He's been in so many of our essays because he's the one that wrote the essay about Tricky back in the day that linked it to hauntology.
Okay.
And he also is majorly sourced throughout this book. And he was like the Wired essayist or journalist that kind of had a landmark essay that Mark Fisher really, really liked. And the other one is German musician Antje Grey.
Yeah.
Antje Grey, who does the soundtrack, and a lot of this focuses on the soundtrack of this.
Yeah, it's a lot of... this film cannot be described in such a way that would do it justice because it is a multimedia project that involves visual and audio.
Crazy.
And the integration of the two along with this guy's musings. The other thing is it's boring as shit and you won't like it if you did say it.
Your reaction and the content itself reminds me of The Quiet Man.
Yeah, well, The Quiet Man is a fucking novel, and it's like a cogent one. Like, I can make fun of The Quiet Man as like, oh, you're writing that kind of, but it's like a fucking story.
I'm linking both of them because I fell asleep to both of them because there are things that you can watch on YouTube that will lull you to sleep because it's just a British man talking over, in an ambient, repetitive way about modernism. Quiet Man is like, he's like walking through city streets in a world that has been decimated, but still going about his days, right? Because he's an accountant. Whereas this is just a dude in a car.
Okay. I don't know. One of the most gratifying aspects of content is the fact that, by contrast with so many contemporary television documentaries, which neurotically hector the audience by incessantly reiterating their core thesis, Petit trusts in the intelligence and speculative power of the viewer. Cool. I don't know. Maybe he shouldn't have. Maybe I'm the problem.
Where so much television now involves a mutual redundancy of image and voice. The image is slaved into illustrating the text. The voice merely glosses the image. Content is in large part about the spaces between image and text. What is unsaid in and about the images.
Yeah, it's a thing that would be shown at a certain art exhibition along with some other things. It's like, there's a place in the world for it, just none of those places are things I care to watch.
I'd say a film festival would be the obvious one, but a film festival 10, 15 years ago.
They play Kung Fu Panda at a film festival. They'll play anything at a film
EvilJekyll has a whole thing about Kung Fu Panda.
Anyway, he's like driving through like post-industrial southern England and being like slightly melancholic. The chapter is saying that.
The thing that is another callback to another essay, the tricky essay is the quote, "If you could only see what I have seen with your eyes."
Okay. Once again, the British people cannot get over the Tears in the Rain speech from Blade Runner. They're constantly quoting the Tears in the Rain speech from Blade Runner.
Things associated with Ian Penman seem to all quote that. The Tricky does it in his song, "If you could see what I've seen." This is a phrase Penman has made much of in his own writing, on recording technology and haunting, and it brings us to the other meaning of correspondence. Content plays with correspondences in the sense of connections and associations. Some of these are underscored by Petit in his dryly poetic text, others he leaves the viewer to make for themselves. To go back to the last one about Junior Boys, it's about correspondence, it's about moving nomadology. There's a lot of precarity that comes with communicating through things like email because you can get it at all places.
Yeah.
But there's an alienating effect to it.
Yeah, I mean, first paragraph, he points out that he noticed the guy was driving through a place called Felixstowe, because it happened to be close to where Mark Fisher was living, but the name Felixstowe is never mentioned, which Mark Fisher identifies as uncanny, I suppose. Once again, treating that theme of place and the waywardness of place and the absence of place, but it's a present absence, that's ontology, that's stain of place, it's lost futures, a Mark Fisher podcast.
The Germanness, he reflects on the Germanness.
Yeah, and it's like kind of, the constant weird tension between Britishness and Europeanness that this film is kind of attempting to transcend a little bit.
Yeah, with its references to Kraftwerk and Bowie, and kind of a reimagining of British cinema that could assert its Europeanness not by rejecting America, but by confidently absorbing American influences. Yet this future never arrived. Now that's interesting to me, because it's almost a dialectical reversal of what Jameson has about postmodernism, where postmodernism is defined by Americanness being the influencer, not that which is influenced, right?
Well, yeah, he generally says that. Yeah, he has this concept that, like, it used to be that Americans would look to Europe for what high art is, versus today, American culture being the centralizing thing that validates you. If you're European, like if you have access to American film and American culture, that's the good thing to do.
Specifically was Hollywood. Because of the ascendance of Hollywood, that being an export that Americans made a lot of money.
Like, for example, it was 1800s through like really 1920s when you had like the Astors and like that whole fucking culture, like your Gilded Age, robber baron, Victorian America. There was a very common practice of daughters of those families marrying some minor nobility in England for the title. It was like a very common thing, and the way those rich people tended to conduct themselves was, this thing I'm doing is valid because this is how it's done in France.
I connected personally with the way in which creative writing and poetry kind of...
and versus like American blue jeans today.
Well, I was thinking like in the 19th century, like American romantic poetry always looked to English romantic poetry to figure out what was okay, what the form was, what the hottest trends were. And there was a certain type of, we need to replicate these trends in order to validate ourselves in this wider discourse around poetry.
Right.
Whereas that was a symptom of modernism, and certainly like people like T.S. Eliot looked to British high society for how to conduct ourselves.
I mean, anyway, that's what Jameson said. Mark Fisher seems to kind of be saying something different.
Well, no, he's saying that future of America being absorbed by Britain and creating its own future without American influence being the central thing never arrived.
No, I mean, I think what he's kind of saying in this is he's comparing, I mean, specifically British to mainland Europe film is particularly what he's saying. And he's essentially, from my interpretation, saying that British film is marked by a conscious rejection of America, whereas European is marked by an emulation but like kind of recontextualization of America. I can't give you examples as to where that actually happens, but that's kind of what I thought he was saying.
Yeah, he does say could assert its Europeanness not by rejecting America, but by...
okay.
See, that's where I think...
no, you're right. Yeah. Okay, I guess I misinterpreted that. Yeah, like there would be a different British Europeanness that could have existed.
Yeah,
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I think I was reading it wrong.
Because the idea of the postmodernism is that American cinema had to be conformed to in order to make it in the larger, literally the cinematic world. And
right. Well,
that-
I mean, here I think, except when you get to high art, in which case there's a defiant rejection
anti-Americanism.
of America.
Because it's associated so heavily with corporatism.
What's popular and stuff. Americans would never make Salo.
That's true. That could only be done by the Italians, which is the highest form of art.
Yeah. It's about fascism, Stephen. It's about fascism.
And you know who made that joke? Someone we don't talk about anymore.
Oh. Well, yeah. I mean, that's not a joke. The movie is about fascism. It takes place in fascist Italy. The people who are torturing and raping people are all fascists. Pretty, actually, quite clear in what it's saying.
Radio On ended with a car stalled on the edge of the future, which we didn't know then would be Thatcherism.
Yeah.
Ahead lay a bizarre yet banal mix of the unprecedented and the archaic. Instead of accelerating down Kraftwerk's Autobahn, we found ourselves, as Petit puts it in content, reversing into a tomorrow based on a non-existent past.
As Gary Newman said, here in my car, like that band, Cars. Or that other
He says
band,
something out.
Traffic.
In this light, content stands as a quiet but emphatic reproach to the British cinema of the last 30 years. I don't know that it does. Which, in its dominant variants, drab social realism, faux gangster, picture book costume drama, or mid-Atlantic middle-class fantasia, has retreated from modernity. It isn't only the poor and the non-white...
Okay, well, this is actually true. The British people had a plague of trying to do Scorsese in the 2000s.
Oh, like Guy Ritchie?
Yeah, this was a plague upon British cinema in the 2000s, was they were constantly trying to do their own Scorsese, and it always fucking sucked.
Which goes back to Jameson.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Guy Ritchie kind of fucking ruled.
Okay.
I like Snatch.
Yeah, okay. Fine.
What about the other one? The one with
Lock,
Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. That's another good one.
I think I've only ever seen the Mitchell and Webb parody of that.
No, that movie fucking rules.
Okay.
Brad Pitt is a
Okay, I'm pretty sure you're thinking of Snatch. He's an Irish traveler.
No, he's specifically a yes, he's
an Irish traveler, yes, I know. He is not a gypsy. He is not a Roma person. He is an Irish traveler. And he is an Irish traveler in the movie Snatch, which is what Marlowe said.
They call him something else, though.
Because England has a million slurs for Irish traveler. Yeah, they called him something else. I'm sure it was like Puggle or whatever the fuck, and it's probably the rudest thing ever to call someone that. But anyway, he is not a Roma person, he is an Irish traveler, and that is in the movie Snatch, not Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels.
Oh, okay, so they are incorrectly referred to as gypsies.
Well, yeah, okay.
Pikeys.
Yes.
That's the phrase that I was looking
Irish traveler, yes. I mean, that's the other thing is gypsy is like a somewhat ambiguous word, and also whether or not it's a slur or how certain people feel on it. But anyway, it usually implies Roma. It can sometimes be used
because he gets called a pikey for the entire fucking movie,
which is specific to Irish traveler. That's what pikey means.
See, I thought it was specific to Roma.
No, he is an Irish traveler.
All right,
different thing entirely.
All right.
Anyway, point is, as someone who apparently remembers Guy Ritchie more than you, his movies aren't that good, and the British people had a plague of trying to do Scorsese in the 2000s. Scorsese, meanwhile, was making like Gangs of New York and like casting Daniel Day-Lewis and trying to like be a British filmmaker, and he did it great because he has that ability.
It isn't only the poor and the non-white who are edited out of Notting Hill, for example. It's the West London's Ballardian flyover, which now stands as a relic of the modern city that London never became. Yet content isn't just a requiem for the lost possibilities of the last 30 years. In its use of stunning but underused locations, the ready-made post-Fordist science fiction landscapes of Felixstowe, Containerport, the eerie Cold War terrain of nearby Orford Ness, content demonstrates not only what British cinema overlooks, but what it could still be.
Yeah, right.
And
that was well padded by our discussion of what ethnicity Brad Pitt played in which Guy Ritchie movie.
All right, everybody. Time for some fucking cards.